All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. We have an incredible program for you, so we're going to kick things off. We're so happy that you're here with us today. As I mentioned, I am Candace Farrell. I'm Director of Network Communications here at United Way Worldwide. I'll be facilitating today's innovation webinar featuring the United Way of Collier and the Keys Reef Revitalization Initiative, and you are in for a huge treat. I'm joined today by some dedicated United Way colleagues, as well as some incredibly talented partners that you're going to learn more about here momentarily. This webinar will be recorded, so if you happen to miss anything or you'd like a replay of it later, it will be available for you in about a week. There's also a web link that we're going to be providing that you can review this information, as well as a really informative case study that will answer a lot of your questions if you develop any. After the presentation, there will be some time for questions. If you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A feature. If you go ahead and select that, that will enable you to type in any questions, feedback, or thoughts that you have. We'll be able to track it that way. We won't be able to track any questions in the chat. So the chat is awesome for connecting with colleagues, saying hello, sharing where you're from, but we won't be able to track any actual questions there. So please do navigate over to that Q&A section, type in your questions there, and we'll be able to get you some feedback using that feature. If you go to the bottom of your screen, there's also a transcription option. If you see where it says CC, that will allow you to have a live transcript if you happen to like captions throughout the presentation, if that will help you follow along with what's being covered today. There will also be a few polls throughout the session just to gauge your level of understanding, make sure that you are following, and it'll also give you an opportunity to provide some feedback if you have any. That's another way for you to communicate with us. So with that, I now have the wonderful pleasure of introducing Steve Sanderson, who's our president and CEO over at United Way of Collier and the Keys. Steve has led his United Way into life-changing community impact work, including some anti-poverty initiatives like ALICE. Some of you may be familiar with that initiative, as well as many others. The advocacy that Steve leads and the community support covers over 6,000 square miles, spanning a 5-hour drive from Naples all the way down to Key West. And they are the most southernmost United Way. As you know, Key West is only 90 miles from Cuba. So really important and dynamic work happening down there. The partnerships that Steve and the Florida Keys area president, Leah Stockton, have developed for this initiative are really groundbreaking. We're so excited to see this real life example of what can be accomplished with the spirit of collaboration. And I hope that you guys enjoy this incredible presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn over the floor to Steve. Steve, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Candace. I appreciate the kind introduction and everything you, Lynn, Janessa, Mariel, Angela, and the Worldwide team have been doing to make this webinar and the case study possible. Reefs are critical for hurricane protection and economic stability. We started this initiative not just because we care about the environment, but because we care about the people in the environment. We hope that being the first United Way to work on reef restoration will inspire others to innovate the ways in which they are supporting their communities nationally and internationally. Today, you will be hearing on a very high level how this vision is coming together, and I encourage you to review the case study for more details. I am proud to introduce our amazing team that is making all this work possible to tell our story, a true community effort with a diverse group of industries coming together for the common good of the environment and local residents. And now, today's presenters. Donna Almarashi is the head of cultural diplomacy for the Embassy of the United Arab Emirates. I am proud to call her and the ambassador friends. Donna will be joining via a pre-recorded video from the UAE. Her team has done amazing work in the United States and across the world in disaster recovery and cultural engagement. Dr. Scott Winters is CEO of Coral Restoration Foundation. He is widely published with multiple advanced degrees. He is co-chair of the Coral Restoration Consortium, a group he co-founded with NOAA to help scale up restoration efforts around the world. Scott was recently appointed to the governing committee of the G20 Coral Research and Development Accelerator Platform. Scott has led the growth of the Coral Restoration Foundation from a small, tiny local nonprofit to a world leader in this field. Sarah Fangman is superintendent of the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. Sarah is responsible for leadership, vision, and strategic direction, overseeing a staff of more than 40 employees and affiliates. Through her work with the sanctuary system, she's conducted more than 600 scuba dives in the Florida Keys, has a Coast Guard 100-ton master's captain's license, and is certified submersible pilot. She holds a master's degree in marine affairs, and as you will learn, she's right in the center of raising $100 million to restore the 7 iconic reefs in the Florida Keys. Teresa Axford is superintendent of Monroe County Public Schools. She is a 36-year career veteran. She started as a teacher, working her way through the system. She is the first woman superintendent in Monroe County. She's known for her many established partnerships with community organizations, inclusive of the United Way, to support students towards high-wage and high-need jobs in the community. She is focused on a delivery system that fits students' needs. Leah Stockton is the project leader for this innovative reef revitalization and beyond project. She led local United Way efforts during Hurricane Irma, assisting thousands of Keys residents, facilitated coordinated responses to the COVID-19 pandemic, working with social service organizations, as well as local, state, and federal programs. Leah has lived in Key West for the past 17 years, and before United Way worked in these same ocean-based tourism industries we are helping. Now let's get started, and to do that, I want to turn it over to Sarah Fangman. Sarah?
Thank you, Steve. I am going to guess that many of you, when you think of the Florida Keys, you think of coral reefs. Our reefs are indeed central to our identity and our culture, and the natural resources of the Florida Keys are truly a national treasure. This is North America's only coral barrier reef. We don't have anything else like this incredible place elsewhere in our country. Recognizing how unique and valuable these waters were, the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary was established in 1990 by Congress to protect this special place. And you can see the boundaries of the sanctuary on this slide. We protect 3,800 square miles around the Keys, and within the sanctuary are over 6,000 species of marine life. This magical place includes not only our iconic reefs, but also one of the largest seagrass communities north of the equator, and 1,700 islands with 1,800 miles of mangrove shoreline. All of that is interconnected, and we are connected to all of that. Next slide. Our reefs and marine environment are not only central to our way of life, our culture, they are essential to our economy, and that is why it is often referred to as a blue economy. A healthy reef attracts visitors, and over 5 million people visit the Keys every year. A healthy reef also supports seafood fisheries. Tourism and commercial fishing are two of the biggest economic drivers in our community. Over half of the residents in the Florida Keys depend upon our marine environment for their livelihood. And of course, ALICE workers play essential roles in those industries. Next slide. But it goes even further than that. These reefs provide an important ecosystem service. They provide coastal protection. That photo in the center of the slide really tells the story. Our reefs diminish wave energy coming in from the ocean and minimize their potential impacts as they reach the shore. And the value of that coastal protection can actually be calculated. The US Geological Survey and UC Santa Cruz recently did a study and calculated the benefit to Florida from the coastal protection provided by our reefs. And they estimated that to be $232 million every year. But that's not to say massive storm events like Hurricane Irma still can't cause impacts to our community, but they would be much, much greater were it not for our reefs. Next slide. Now, you don't need to be a coral biologist or a marine scientist to know that coral reefs are in trouble, and they have been for decades. That is true of reefs around the world, unfortunately, not just here in Florida. What you're seeing here is a series of images of a reef in the Keys taken over time. The pictures pretty much speak for themselves. It is devastating, especially given how I just described our community's dependence on these resources. Now, these declines are the result of a variety of threats. Some of those are human caused, like declining water quality. Others are natural events and threats, like storm events such as Hurricane Irma. As a consequence of these combined threats, our coral cover, which can be used as a measure of a reef's health, that coral cover has declined from around 25% to more like 2%, which is getting to be a pretty urgently low number. I don't know if there's such a thing as an urgently low number, but I'm going to say there is. With coral communities in that state, it can be difficult for them to recover without intervention. Next slide.
And that brings us to why we're here today. Sarah has done a great job laying out, why this is important from an environmental standpoint, but it's also critically important to our community. And that's why our United Way has gone outside the box to tackle this issue, because the work that we're doing overlaps the health, the education, and the financial stability of our community. It aligns with the work that we're already doing. The coastal protection will make our community more resilient in a future storm. That aligns with our disaster work. And we still do our other programs. They're still important, but we know that we need to think bigger. We need to look to the future. All that we're doing today is for naught if we can't think through what are these big problems that 10, 20, 30 years from now will really impact the core of who our community is and how our residents are able to make a living. Our United Way of Collier and the Keys is undoubtedly the only United Way doing coral reef restoration, but this is what our community needs. It's what our residents need. A healthy coral reef is financial stability, and that means thriving residents. That's a direct correlation for our unique situation. And the internships and scholarships and educational grants that you'll hear more about, those have improved education in a way that matters here locally. Ms. Axford will speak more about that later. And next slide, please. And so how we even began this project, the United Arab Emirates has a history, as you'll hear Donna speak to a bit more in her video, of friends helping friends in need. They made a $10 million pledge to then Governor Scott following Hurricane Irma, and have supported work in Jacksonville, in Naples, and now here in the Florida Keys. At the same time that our United Way was working with the UAE on developing this project, Sarah and NOAA's partners were also working on developing Mission Iconic Reefs, which is this huge $100 million coral restoration project. So there was parallel momentum between the two projects. The UAE is also heavily invested and interested in climate change and environmental causes as well. It's an issue impacting their country, and they have the philosophy everyone works better when we can work together. What are the big issues that we can solve as a team? So all of these pieces fit together, and our partners will now share more details about what exactly this collaboration looks like and what it means here in our community. And we'll start with a pre-recorded video from Donna. She recorded this from the UAE. Next slide.
Hello everyone, thank you for the kind welcome. I'm really sorry I cannot join you live at this very important and timely conference where so many impressive experts have been carefully curated to discuss environmental issues and challenges the United Arab Emirates shares and works closely with partners in the United States and around the world. But I am honored to have been asked to contribute a few thoughts with everyone here today. So a special thank you for this opportunity and our long-standing partnership to my close friends, Steve Sanderson, Dr. Sarah Fangman, and Leah Stockton. Our partnership began soon after Hurricane Irma devastated communities across Florida back in 2017. Our connections through shared values of lending a helping hand was immediate. Our common interest in working together to find solutions for environmental sustainability, habitat recovery, revitalizing and rebuilding communities stronger, better equipped, and with more opportunities for people was and is in perfect sync. UAE's and my personal friendship with Steve, Leah, Sarah Fangman with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the wonderful people on each of their teams, and with the great state of Florida has only grown stronger ever since. Even though my country is only 50 years old this year, our culture and heritage has for centuries guided us to care for others first, give back when and wherever we can, connect and share with those, and also believe in the same values and are willing to work together to take care of this planet we all share and to create a better world for all of us. The UAE has been blessed in recent years and seen hardships many times over, but thankfully, we've also been fortunate to have generations of visionary and compassionate leadership that continue to create policy and lead by example in supporting and encouraging the creation of a growing number of humanitarian initiatives to provide aid, supplies, funds, technology, transportation, and other resources to help our friends and neighbors.
Okay, so now that we've heard about some of the challenges faced in our community and why this work is important, what is the project? What is revitalizing the Florida Keys through reef restoration and beyond? This is a holistic approach to the sustainability of our community, from coral restoration to education to community stewardship. It's an approach that tries to tackle short, long-term solutions at many levels. And our partners will get into that more here today. Our restoration and our education funds are matched, and this really demonstrates that community buy-in that's so critical to the success of this project. $2.5 million through United Way is matched by our Reef Restoration Partners dollar for dollar to become $5 million. That can potentially be leveraged for $10 million. So we're talking a really big impact. It's a really big goal, $100 million, but that first 10 million could potentially be brought in through this project is really exciting. And next slide, please. And in addition to the work that we're doing here locally, we want to take this to a broader level, and we want to look at how we can be stronger working together on a global scale. We will be sponsoring the Reef Futures Symposium in September. This is the only conference specifically dedicated to coral restoration that brings practitioners from around the world together to collectively move coral restoration research and practical application forward effectively. We also have a global learning exchange where we will have have Florida Keys-based coral restoration practitioners and students travel to the Middle East, and those in the Middle East travel here to do an exchange of knowledge and best practices. So you'll really hear as we move through these next slides that this is a community-wide initiative with federal, state, local, international partners, from preschoolers on a school field trip to Reef Relief to a coral fragging party with Coral Restoration Foundation. The more engagement, the more successful this effort. So now I'll turn it over to our partners who are really critical in making this work happen. Next slide.
So recognizing how vital these reefs are and seeing their declining condition, we mapped out an ambitious plan to restore reefs at 7 iconic sites throughout the Florida Keys. I mentioned earlier that our reefs have declined to coral cover of around 2%. Our goal is to return them to a more resilient and regenerative level of about 25%. You can see that sort of mapped out on the slide here. Now, recognizing it took decades of decline to get to these low levels, we are not going to be able to turn this around overnight, unfortunately. We anticipate that this is going to be a several decade long effort with multiple phases, as you can see on the slide here. As a part of this rigorous planning of the effort, we also calculated the cost. And as you heard Leah say, it is a significant cost. Getting through those first 2 phases, we estimate will cost close to $100 million. This is the largest restoration effort ever attempted in the United States. And as Leah noted, depends upon a really holistic approach and a lot of public-private partnerships. So when we started, we had big ideas, but not yet big budgets, which is why the partnership with the United Way and the United Arab Emirates was so critical. Their vision and their leadership provided the initial catalyst funding to get this effort off the ground, or sorry, in the water. And this work is not only, as we've said, to help our reefs, but more critically, to help this community and the next generations of stewards of these reefs. Next slide.
Miss Axford, there you are.
Yes, oops, sorry. So the new strategic plan of the Monroe County Schools, which is under development, really ties to this effort beautifully and the mission of the project. We want every student from pre-K through grade 12 to understand the importance of protecting our environment and valuing it. And it's clear from numerous town halls and other meetings with stakeholders that parents want that as well as the community. Students need to embrace their responsibility to protect our beautiful coral reefs and other natural resources in the Keys, but also understand that much of our economy and the future are tied to them. In addition, there are financial opportunities and wonderful careers in marine science, fishing, and diving that are all tied to our environment. Through the leadership of the United Way of Collier County and the Keys, in highlighting the importance of reef restoration and protection, we were given a goal. We are advocating that each school in our district become an Ocean Guardian school. And this is a NOAA program that features not only curriculum at every grade level, but also experiential opportunities for students. And students can learn about coral outplanting and other means of reef restoration through this process. Our mission is for students to become leaders in our effort for sustainability and to embrace a role in stewardship. These efforts are heightened through grants from the Coral Restoration Foundation, which allows students to experience stewardship firsthand. Students are participating in projects like extensive field trips to the Everglades, the dry Tortugas, and other critical areas in the Keys to learn about resources and how to protect them. It goes with that adage, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime. In addition to the Coral Restoration Foundation, as part of this program, there are marine science educational advancement scholarships that are being awarded to support secondary students after high school. We believe that all these efforts coordinated are going to make a difference for students and their outlook on their future and life in the Keys. Thank you.
So, how do you actually restore a coral reef? It's actually a simple process. The hard corals that make up Florida's reef tract can be propagated from clippings, just like plants. A fragment about the size of your finger is taken, suspended from a coral tree in the ocean, and in less than a year, you have a coral the size of a basketball, which can then be outplanted onto the reef. The method is low tech and inexpensive. And because of these traits, this method is inclusive and widely accessible. Students of all ages can learn through hands-on experience about the link between the environment and their community. Tourists and volunteers can experience the work and the results of coral restoration through dive programs, volunteer opportunities, and voluntourism experiences. And the local workforce can be cross-trained, leveraging their experiences in new ways to obtain additional job opportunities and socioeconomic resiliency. The simple act of reef restoration is really about community restoration and building resiliency. Now, I'd like to ask Steve to highlight some of the results that we've done to date.
Thank you, Scott, Sarah, Teresa, Donna, Leah, and all our partners. So let's discuss some of the results of this 5-year project. In just our first 2 years, keeping in mind COVID was involved in our world during that, we've awarded $2.3,777,000 and some change for reef restoration, education, and outreach combined. The Coral Restoration Foundation has received $1.9 million, Reef Renewal USA $385,000, both for the work on the 3 of the 7 iconic reef sites. Other progress includes over 80 volunteers providing 728 hours, 40 interns contributing over 10,400 hours, all of these again towards outreach and education. We are now outplanting corals. The growth will be monitored over the next 4 years and reported quarterly to the United Way. Scholarships. Just this month, we provided 22,000 of our 155,000 commitment in scholarships between 6 college students. As far as education grants, 23,000 of our 180,000 commitment in education grants have been awarded for teachers in educational facilities. Over 7,000 children are benefiting in just our first year, including Nathan, who is an Ocean Studies charter school student who will share in his own words firsthand his knowledge. Please show the video.
Studying mangrove biodiversity, I like the adventurous feeling, that stepping in the mud and all of that, and probably one of my favorite ones is when we took the boat out into Pelican Key. I experienced a lot of things. We saw some tree frogs, some lizards, orb weaver spiders, and a lot of other different things like starfish and more.
Who couldn't
How could you not be inspired after listening to him? I feel that Nathan says it better than all the rest of us. That's what this is all about, is for our future. And so with that, for those of you that are listening, you know, I'm sure at this point you're wondering, how can you get started? What can you do in your community to make a difference in the environment and for the residents of your community? Some tips that we've learned so far in doing this work are to identify issues that overlap between the environment and financial stability, health, and education in your community. I'm sure many of you answered in the poll that there are environmental issues in your community that affect the health and well-being of your residents. How does the environment affect the quality of life of your community? Next slide. As you start to think about what this could look like in your community, we have a few tips that we'd like to pass along. Don't be afraid to think outside the box. We are the only ones doing coral restoration, but we're also the only one whose community depends on this. So what is that one issue, or what are those few issues that matter in your community? Find a liaison that speaks the language, walks the walk, talks the talk. We have a marine biologist on our staff, and we also have someone within the NOAA team to provide that technical expert. I am not an expert in the area of coral restoration, but I have surrounded myself with those who are. And consider, do you have other local, state, or federal partners that are already doing some of this work, and your momentum, your potential behind them could just make that work so much of a deeper impact in the community? And think about, as you move forward, how can you adapt your processes? Here at Our United Way, we still use volunteers to review applications, score funding requests. We still use our same grant management system that we use for our more traditional United Way work. But we've also had to forge new ground and make new partnerships. And we're learning as we go. This is a big commitment that we have made. We're just in the very first few years of it, and we're looking about how can we make this something that is more ingrained in the community? How can we make it something that becomes part of the culture of our community moving forward? And we hope that our approach and the work that we're doing can be replicated in other places. And Scott will take it from here to talk a little bit more about why these efforts matter.
Next slide. Thank you, Leah. I'm honored that I've been asked to provide the wrap up for today's presentation and this exciting work. Coral restoration is important because it is not about the corals. It's about people. It's about livelihoods, and it is about community. Now, please don't misunderstand me. We are deeply concerned about protecting the planet's most imperiled ecosystem because coral reefs are integral, essential to the communities where they are. It's about people, their happiness, their livelihood, their future. The majority of the world's coral reefs are found in low GDP, economically challenged regions without policies, infrastructure, or expertise to restore their reefs or protect their environment, and thus protect their way of life. As a result, there is a serious risk that divisions of equity, equality, and access are going to be widened in coming years rather than closed. The communities that are most dependent on their coral reefs for their livelihood and their identity will continue to be at risk. Coral restoration needs to be about building ecological and social resiliency while closing gaps in poverty, diversity, and inclusion. At the end of the day, the number of corals does not matter. What seems like a large number today will be trivial tomorrow. What does matter is how we get there, by focusing on collaboration, on people, on inspiration, on making connections, on being part of the community. The whole point is to put power into the hands of people that can use it, people that are on the front line and changing their world. If we want to save coral reefs, then we need to inspire local communities and provide them with resources to be successful. Success comes from people protecting what's in their backyard. And we need to reframe what success means. No longer measured by how many corals are outplanted, but how resilient the local community is, how much money is brought into and stays in the local economy, and how the quality of life can be improved for future generations by valuing local coral reefs. Coral restoration isn't just about the corals, it's about community. So thank you for your time, your interest, and your commitment to being a catalyst of change.
Thank you, Scott. Next slide, please. And thank you to Scott, to Ms. Axford, to Sarah, Donna, for joining us here today. I hope that we have inspired you to consider how you can go back and take up the banner of this innovative work in your communities, whether a small project or a large initiative like we have undertaken. How can you make that difference in your local community? The environment and the community are so intertwined, as this quote says. You can't have one without the other. The work that we're doing may seem uncomfortable because it is outside of United Way's comfort zone. But I can tell you, as someone who has lived here for 17 years, it is also uncomfortable to sit back and watch your environment reach a state of devastation where it may not return. So we're going to continue to fight this fight, and we're going to continue to do this work. It's put us into a whole new league in the community. United Way, people are looking to us and recognizing that we see this big problem, and we're stepping up, and we're tackling this to be part of the solution for the future of our community. It's a major investment that we're making, but it will take years to accomplish. But it has the potential to change the future of our community. So my closing request to you is to think about, how can you do this in your community? What's the one thing or the two things that you can do to change the future of your community's environment and the people that reside in your area? And with that, we will turn it over to question and answers.
Thank you so much, all of you. My goodness, what an inspiring program. And, you know, I'm ready to put on my United Way rash guard and start propagating. Scott, I'm heading your way. So we're gonna take some questions now. And while you guys take a moment to just formulate your thoughts about anything that we covered, I do have a few already submitted that we wanted to get in front of our speakers. Folks were already curious about. So I'm actually going to start with Ms. Axford. It looks like there's a question for you. What advice do you have so I could approach the school district in my community about an innovative project like this? If you could share some thoughts there.
So that's an interesting question. I think that what we did was we approached the science coordinator and the science teachers in the district. They were very excited right away because, you know, science teachers are, it's part of their repertoire to be closely connected to the environment. And what we realized is that curriculum in Florida, they have environmental science in 4th and 7th grade and marine science in 10th grade. The rest of the grades are kind of left out. And so that's when we realized that we needed to make this a pre-K-12 agenda. And we led with our science teachers. So I think you should try to go in that direction in your district.
Wonderful. Great insights there. And gosh, how inspiring was Nathan? I loved his point of view as a
Absolutely.
young person. That was really incredible. So we have a question here for Sarah. I'm coming over to you. One of our participants would like to know, how can they get more involved in this effort as someone who may not live in the Florida Keys?
That's a great question. You do not have to be in the Keys to help the corals. So please do not limit yourself to thinking that you have to be here to help. Corals don't have a voice. And as you heard me say at the very beginning, I believe, and I know I may be biased, but this is a national treasure. We've been talking about the benefits and the importance to the community, but it is also a national treasure. So I encourage people who are not in the Keys to use your voice on behalf of this national treasure and speak up about the importance of protecting and restoring places like this. It's really important. We actually have some elected official on this webinar, and it really matters when they hear from constituents. So speak up, even if you're in Ohio, speak up for corals. So that's one thing. Second thing is that this project, as I mentioned also, is a public-private partnership. There are a lot of nonprofits that are key to this mission's success, including two that are represented here, United Way, Coral Restoration Foundation, but there are others, Moat Marine Lab, Reef Renewal. There are nonprofits that you can support. I know there were links put in the chat. Check out the links, learn more about who's involved, support them. And then the last thing I'll say is, if you can come to the Florida Keys, there is work that you can do to help. And so with that, I'm going to pitch it to my friend Scott and invite him to talk about how people can actually get involved locally.
Thank you, Sarah. So first, you should go to coralrestoration.org, our website. We have a lot of educational materials. So whether you're passionate about corals or not, we have after-school programs for kids for all over the country online. We have school materials that people can engage with in the classroom to learn more about coral reefs and how they relate to the environment. And we actually have a national competition every year for people, any kids anywhere in the country, to start generating ideas on how to save the reefs. But more importantly, and the reefs are really important, and I love Mission Iconic Reefs and the reefs, but the real power of this is that we want to show that we can inspire change. We use outplanting corals and coral restoration as the example, but the key is wherever you're at in your community, wherever there's a student, there's an issue, and they just need to be empowered to see they can make a difference. So the key takeaway is offering tools that catalyze that desire and change. Hopefully, it contributes to our saving of the coral reefs, but if it works to connect with other issues, then we're excited by it and supportive of it. So please, we have an education program manager. He'd be happy to follow up with anybody, anywhere in the country or the world, about the resources we can offer and support.
And we also have a marine science resource guide through our United Way website that the links going in the chat right now. It provides information on everything from internships to scholarships, summer camps, volunteerism opportunities. And so feel free to check that link as well for many partners that are doing work just like Scott's incredible work throughout the Keys.
Thanks so much for that. Wonderful, wonderful. Yes, folks, don't forget to check the chat. Lots of great links there. And also at the bottom of your screen is where that Q&A feature is. If you have any thoughts, feedback, questions. We saw some really interesting suggestions in the chat about partnering with Airbnb and others. So really great ideas happening, and we appreciate those innovations and brainstorming tips. We do have a question for Steve. Coming over to you, Steve. How engaged is your community leadership within this program?
Well, thanks, Candace. And that's a really deep question. And on a scale of 1 to 10, I would offer it's an 8. And why is that? Because there's some room for improvement. There's more people to educate, opportunities to inform and empower others. Pretty darn good though where we're at. And why do I say this? Because our leadership's emotionally involved. And by that, they know this is a big deal. They know this is a life situation. And as Scott's pointed out very eloquently, in some cases, it depends upon whether you have a job or not in other situations. So it's a big deal. They know it will change the landscape of the local community. And they know that there's lessons learned that can impact not just the local area, the region, but the world. So that's very exciting. That's very invigorating. And I think a lot of us often forget as local United Ways that what we're doing locally can be innovated, can be created, and can be taken in concepts that can impact the world. And we're fortunate to be able to be seeing that and living that out firsthand. I also want to offer that the leadership here intellectually gets it. And what do I mean by that? It's the fact that 60% of the workforce is dependent upon the reef. That speaks for itself. That's our environment. That's our economy. That's what Dr. Axford was sharing about their students and high wage jobs and needs in the community and her engagement, as well as everybody else. And there's another aspect, I think, just generally of humanity that's brought us to this level of scale. And that's that individuals are socially involved. And as was already mentioned, there's a lot of local government leaders that are part of this call and listening in. They connect together daily on all sorts of topics. But what's the common bond, particularly in the Florida Keys? There's water all around. And what does the Florida Keys have that no other place in the world has? 7 iconic reefs. That's a little bit mind-blowing for somebody who leads a United Way and never ever thought when I first got into this business, we would be hiring a marine biologist to be on our staff team. And we're not hiring that marine biologist because we care about the environment. As we started this meeting, we're hiring that marine biologist because we care about people that live in this environment. So by working together, being socially involved and socially connecting, it's really creating this as to be a very exciting project. And that project's attracted, as you've heard from Donna Almarashi, people from around the world. And then we have this Reef Futures Conference. So that's going to bring in other people and other partners in other countries. And as you just learned from, being around Dr. Axford, Dr. Sangman, and Dr. Winters, the kind of caliber that's surrounding this project and the network just keeps getting bigger and bigger. However, it's all concentrated within the local community as well. So it's just a little bit mind-blowing for me that what collaboration can do in involving community leadership in a project. So don't ever underestimate the opportunities that might be in your community, no matter what you think about them in terms of what could be done. And I think that's one of our greatest lessons learned.
Thank you so much for that, Steve. So we'll take a few more minutes, folks. You have an incredible wealth of expertise here on this call. So any other questions, now is a great time to go ahead and pop those into the Q&A section. Just as a wrap-up item, all of the links that have been covered today will be sent out to everyone who's participated via an email after this webinar. The recording of this will be available in about a week, but all of the links and ways to navigate to the case study, resources that have been shared, that will all be available for you. I'm gonna check one more time. Okay, looks like we don't have any more questions. So with that, thank you again so much for joining. Really appreciate all of our partners and our United Way colleagues that have joined today. Thank you for our colleagues that, these collaborations are just a great indication of what can be accomplished when we get together. So have a fantastic afternoon and rest of the day, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.